I welcome all of you to this week's community show. This show is convened by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV, and I'm your host, Martin. In this show, we talk about matters to do with community, matters affecting community, matters impacting community. And this week, we are talking about the environment, and specifically in honor of the Environment Day 2023, we want to tackle the issue that has been chosen as the leading theme for this year's Environment Day, and that is an issue to do with plastics. The theme of this year's Environment Day is solutions to plastic pollution. Now, Uganda is no stranger to plastics, with Ugandans discarding about 600 tons of plastic every day, and less than 50% of that plastic is disposed of in a correct manner. Therefore, there is a lot of plastics that remain in the water, on the land, in the air. This is what makes this conversation very pertinent. And we want to have this discussion with the people who are involved in environment policy, activists, and people who also have knowledge on this issue to help us substantiate and understand how indeed we can have solutions to plastics in Uganda, but also around the world. I'll ask each one of them to introduce themselves, and then we shall begin the show. We shall begin with Irene, Sandra, and Frank in that order, then consequently Simon.
Thank you very much, Martin. My name is Tonjigwe Irene, and I work with the community organization. I work with women, especially vulnerable women in Uganda. I work with the organization called Women for Green Economy Movement Uganda, and we are dealing on the project of loss and damage in Mbare district, and we are also dealing in sensitizing women and girls, raising their voices in climate change impacts, so that their voices are really being inclusive while making decision making in climate change. And then we are dealing with the project of waste management. Since we are dealing with a green economy, there is no way how we can promote a green economy when we have poor waste management in our country. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Sandra Ariamanya. My academic background is in meteorology, and I am a climate policy and advocacy associate with Phoenix Children Foundation.
Hello everyone, my name is Frank Wiche. I am a lawyer by profession. Currently, I am the co-founder and team leader of Greenery Environmental Research Center Uganda. Our organization focuses on policy reviews and policy research, and then we recommend to government organizations and community leaders what adjustments need to be made to these policies, depending on how they've been applicable, how they've been implemented, and how they've been enforced, if it is working or if it's not working. So entirely, as we're moving into a green economy, clean energy, we are working day and night to ensure that government policies are practical. And we're also making sure that we help government and local authorities realize whether the policies that are in place have been effective and what changes they need to make, or if there are any adjustments and new policies that need to come in place. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Simon Peter Kadapao. I work with the Center for Constitutional Governance based in Mbale. And right now we are implementing a project called The Voice, funded by Oxfam. And our major focus is to reclaim civic space through self-led influencing and activities to create platforms and avenues where citizens have a say in safeguarding the environment and other spheres of life that affect them.
Thank you very much for those brief introductory remarks. So, as I said in the beginning, that each year we celebrate the World Environment Day, and today marks the World Environment Day and 50 years. We mark the anniversary of 50 years of the World Environment Day, which was designated for the 5th of June, and it has been celebrated for the last 50 years. Each year, themes are chosen to tackle a number of issues, and from environment, from waters, from wildlife, name it. And this year, the issue is to beat plastic. In the years, many years ago, plastic pollution was way below, and perhaps it was little. And now, in fact, in 1950, it is stated that the global plastic production was about around 2 million metric tons. In 2019, it's reached a staggering figure of 368 million metric tons. And I told you earlier that in Uganda alone, each day, 600 tons of waste, is generated or produced or discarded. We want to now ask our panelists to help us, first of all, understand the concept of World Environment Day. And then later, help us understand what this particular theme for this year means for Uganda, and specifically for communities in Uganda. I'll begin with you, Irene.
Thank you very much, Martin. As a Ugandan, first of all, I congratulate all Ugandans that have reached on this day of celebrating our environment. But as a Ugandan, with all the plastics that we are staying with, or that we are living with, the plastics that really have affected our environment, I don't see the importance of celebrating this day, because as government, they have really not done something to create public awareness to the communities on how they can really promote proper waste management within their communities. So I think as Ugandans, we still have a long way to go to make sure that we put in place the importance why we really need to celebrate the environmental day on the environmental day, because very many people don't know what to do, and we are very well aware that these plastics has also contributed on the impacts of climate change. And then that's why we are seeing in a month, you find that more than 10 districts have been affected by climate change impacts. People are dying. We are facing loss and damage, both economic loss and damage and non-economic loss and damage, which is not quantitative, which we cannot see, which we cannot measure. And you find that the government agencies are focusing more on the economic loss other than non-economic loss. And yet we know that the non-economic loss are really caused by these plastics that the companies, that the hospitals, the big projects are really dumping into people's communities. And maybe we can talk about the capitalism that we are seeing because of the plastics that we are living with. Very many plastic pollutions are coming from the big companies like Coca-Cola. The bottles that they use, they have not put in place the measures how consumers are going to really help in in reducing the plastics in their communities, or in reducing the pollution that we are seeing being caused by maybe being caused by the dumping of waste within the environment and in our communities. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Irene. I will now ask you, Simon Peter, what the Environment Day means to you, and specifically what this year's theme, how significant this year's theme is to you and to your community in Bale.
Yes, my understanding is of World Environmental Day is that it's a global platform for helping positive change. People from more than 100 countries participate in this day that is designated by the UN to celebrate environment actions and the power of governments, business people, and even community people to ensure that our environment is safeguarded. And also, when you look at plastic pollution, it is essentially an accumulation of synthetic plastic products in the environment that reaches an extent where it causes problems for wildlife, ecosystems, and human populations. And what is causing all this is that we create a large amount of wastes, and a lot of this waste is made out of plastics, and there's little that we do to ensure that these plastics are recycled or reduced. And then also when it comes to water bodies, it is the commercial fishing nets that we look at in the water bodies, where you see these nets always capture the water bottles, not necessarily water bottles, but bottles in general. And then also we look at the issue of mismanaged plastic disposal. So much plastic does not get recycled when it should be. And it goes into, when the plastics actually go into the rivers, there is a lot of these these plastics that go on land. And at the end of the day, it becomes a threat to public life and human life, and then also, public life, ecosystem, and wildlife. And then we also overuse plastics. In Uganda, actually, basically in Mbale here, there is an estimated 2 tons of plastics that is collected after every 3 weeks. So those are the issues that we look at when it comes to plastics in Bali and Uganda as a whole.
Thank you very much for that. And to you, Sandra, what does the Environment Day mean to you? And in context of the plastics, from where you stand at a policy, research and analysis level, how grave is this plastic issue?
Thank you very much. What environment day means to me, in my understanding, our environment is basically our surroundings, right? So this means Environment Day is basically supposed to remind us to conserve and take care of our environment, not only for ourselves, but for the future generation as well. So we have a pressing issue of climate change, right? So it is something that is going on, and it is happening at a very, very high rate. So on Environment Day, I think we're supposed to find linkages between the environment and how we are depleting it and how it is contributing to climate change. So yes, that is basically what Environment Day means to me. And with in regards to our theme today, like you had said, Martin, in the beginning, according to statistics, about 600 tons of plastic are being produced daily in Uganda, with about 60% being properly disposed of and 40% being recklessly disposed of. In this way, is an improper disposal. Maybe the people dump plastic bottles. Plastic bottles are the biggest problem, honestly speaking. So they dump bottles out of their vehicles, dump them onto the road, dump them into swamps, and this affects the ecosystem in various ways. So under this theme, I think what we need to do is understand how plastic really affects us, because about 5% of plastic is properly recycled. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like I'm going to keep going on and on, but basically that's what the theme means to me.
Yeah, and actually that is the question I was going to ask. When you said 40%, I mean 60% is properly disposed of, I wanted to follow it up and ask what that properly disposed of means. Or maybe 60% is just disposed of in the sense of it is burnt. It is, they take it to Kitezi for purposes of Kampala, and other districts also take them to different landfills. Is that what you mean when you say 60%?
I mean, yes, we have a problem of plastic pollution, but in other ways, innovative solutions coming up, right? There's encouragement for people to find innovative ways to dispose of their plastic. So what I probably meant was the innovative ways, maybe the companies that take up the plastic and recycle it in various ways. Yeah, but I think the disposal in Chitezi landfill also doesn't necessarily mean it's properly being disposed of, because at the end of the day, it contributes to the greenhouse gas emission. So yeah, it's an ongoing topic.
Thank you very much. And the idea that, not the idea, but the reality that only 5% of plastics in Uganda actually recycled should scare us. I want to ask Frank how this theme resonates with them, how it resonates with you, Frank, this theme of this year's Environment Day, from your perspective as a person who is concerned about the environment, but also is in the civil society space of defending the environment. What does this year's theme mean to you and your entity?
Thank you very much, our host. I was actually thinking about the World Environment Day for the past weeks or so, and I was just looking at what is the global understanding of World Environment Day. What is the common understanding? And the global understanding of the World Environment Day is that it's a day that we raise awareness and take actions that are supposed to protect, conserve environment. And for many people around the world, this is a day where, governments and agencies are coming up to talk about what are their action plans. They're also coming up to raise awareness, talk about it on TV. What are we going to do? What are the statistics? What are the global challenges and all that about environment and ways to move forward? Sort of like coming together to the table and saying, hey, look, we have this big challenge, but how do we go about it? How do we protect our environment? How do we raise awareness? That is the global understanding, at least in my opinion. But if we actually contextualize this in Uganda, and I think for me, the World Environment Day in Uganda it's something that I would say is neglected. It's not taken serious. Many of us that are on social media or even have TVs at home, you realize that barely even TV stations give it attention, or even government agencies giving it attention. They're looking at it like this is just any other day. If you compare World Environment Day to maybe other days like Heroes Day, or let's say the 26th of January Day, or any other day, let's say Women's Day, for example, or Mother's Day, quite a lot, you're going to realize that they will receive all kinds of attention. Big officials are going to come out and say something, or even like tweets or anything. We barely saw that in Uganda. So for many Ugandans, whether educated or people in the informal sector, World Environment Day is still looked at like this is not for us. It doesn't concern us. We don't need to know anything about environment, and that gives you an understanding of the whole picture of how people actually still think about environmental conservation and sustainable development. Quite a number of people still think that this is the hope. That's the best way I can say it. They don't think it's urgent. They don't think it's important. They don't think it's a danger. They don't think that it is anything important. And I think one of the speakers mentioned before that Uganda as a country, our biggest focus is still on economic development. Being a third world country, we're doing everything to make sure that we try to develop, which is good. You see there's a lot of industrialization going on, government doing everything to investors to come and start up industries and all that. But as we focus on economic development, you get to realize that there's very little attention given to the effects of these industries on environment. Very little attention is given to enforcement of these policies. So for me, a World Environment Day in Uganda is still a day that I would say that in Uganda is not considered. We still need to reflect as a country, see how far we have come and the things that we need to do. But even if you zero it down looking at pollution by plastic waste, Uganda passed, if you look at the Environment Act of 2019, we had a previous act before and it was amended. And there are lots of policies that have been put in place. And many of you will recall that Uganda actually banned plastic manufacturing, for example, polythene bags. But if you ask anyone if that is being implemented, every time I go to the supermarket and I'm buying something, they're still giving you the products using polythene bags. But in terms of the law and policy and regulation, this has been banned. Last year, NEMA wrote an article saying that they can hardly enforce the banning of the polythene bags. So you get to realize that there is still a big challenge in terms of just understanding, before you even talk about the plastic pollution, just the understanding of the environment and giving it attention and importance that it deserves. It is still lacking in Uganda. Our economic policies are not in it. Our development policies do not take into account environment as yet. And then our enforcement mechanisms completely disregard the environment. So for me, I would say that it's still a sad day in Uganda. It's not taken serious. People are, whether educated or not educated, people in the formal sector and those ones in the informal sector, nobody still gives it the kind of attention that we need. And I think as Ugandans that are here in the civic space, we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work in terms of raising awareness, a lot of work in terms of advocacy, a lot of work in terms of research. Because if we're going to make impact, then we need to actually come on as well and do research, put out the statistics. And for me, that's one of the biggest motivation why I co-founded my organization, Greenery, because we're saying, look, there's been a lot of this conversation, and government is trying to bring all these laws, all these policies, but nobody has actually sat down to do research on government policies, to actually come out and say, look, the ban on environment is not working. Why? Because one, you're not enforcing it well, or you don't consider these, or there are a lot of things that go into place. And so I think people in the civic space, we have a long way to go, but I'm very positive that it's a conversation that young people are taking interest about. People from different sectors, like law, sciences, and all that. People are taking interest. Previously, the other sectors where people didn't care, for example, like many lawyers looked at environmental practice, like, what are you talking about? What am I going to do environmental practice? Like, is there even money? So you get to realize that as we keep talking about this, as we keep having this conversation, we're actually going to bring people on board. People are going to take interest. Young people are going to come up from universities, those who are already working, and they will understand that, oh, there's actually need for us to protect our environment, or less we risk being extinct in 30 years and 50 years from now, where we will not have any way to grow food, we'll have drought, we'll have high floods, and all these other challenges. So it could be a wordy answer, but it's I would actually speak the whole day just about the pain I feel about how Environment Day is neglected in Uganda. and how many of them don't take it serious at all?
You have introduced in something that is of great interest to me personally, and that is looking at development. Many people are chasing economic development, and Uganda is also falling into that trap of thinking that economic development shouldn't care about the environment, and it has been evident in this ECOP debate. I mean, ECOP, in my view, is a dangerous project, and you don't have to agree. It's a dangerous project for Uganda. It's a dangerous project for the environment. And the argument has been, why do you want us not to exploit these oil deposits? The European countries did that. America has done that, and other developed countries have done that. So why do you want us not to benefit, yet the others have benefited? And the question is, why? Do you have to follow the same model if you're saying that they destroyed the environment? Are we in the competition of destroying the environment? Should we all struggle to destroy the environment just because of growth? But in any case, in relation to what you have stated, there are efforts now at the UN and different economists and thinkers to incorporate the environment in the calculation of GDP. Some have even suggested that instead of using GDP, the metric is now gross ecosystem product. In that, this also account that we put into account nature's contribution to the economic activity and and human well-being of people, as opposed to just the production and output, of goods, services, but rather also look at the environment, how much it contributes to the development and wealth of countries. And I think if that metric was taken into place, we would even have African countries perhaps even be considered developed countries, in the sense that there is still a bit of environment sustainability in many African countries in regard to emissions and things like that. So your discussion has sort of reminded me of that debate, and it's ongoing, and researchers and experts at the UN think that it would be a good move to include the environment in calculating the GDP, or in calculating economic growth. And so in relation to the attitudes of Ugandans when it comes to the environment, I want to come to you now, Irene. Why do you think, as Ugandans, we are taking the issue of the environment for granted? Why do you think it's not our priority? And why is there animosity when people try to bring solutions to environment issues, but also when people bring the plight of the environment to light? Why do we see opposition? And we've seen it on the ECOP campaigns. Everyone who stands against this, the ECOP is considered a Western agent, is considered funded by Europe and things like that. Yet in real sense, that's not the case. So why do you think there is that tension?
Thank you very much, Martin. I think why there is tension is that we are being governed by capitalism. We are tending really to benefit the investors who are not Ugandans and leaving out the Ugandans out. You can imagine that bringing it in a line of plastic pollution and waste management. When I talk about waste colonialism, you find that one powerful country is coming up to overtake the other. In this line, I talk about developed countries are coming up to take over developing countries. Like when we talk of the US companies, the countries that are really investing more money in fossil fuels than green economic alternatives. We very well know that fossil fuels they contribute more to the pollution of the environment. They contribute more to the poor waste management. If we as Ugandans, have pity on ourselves, starting from government especially, because we have to first believe that Ugandans have the better and good laws and regulations and policies in place. When we look at this agreement of the Global Plastic Agreement, they are really good articles in it, just because I haven't really read through deeply to understand what it is inside. When we talk about like basically Ugandans have the better laws, better policies, regulations in place, but implementation is still a challenge that we are facing. So going back to the pollution, plastic management or plastic pollution starts at an individual who is really centered on environmentalists. Yes, my colleague talked about government has done part on maybe having radio talk shows, having TV shows, but to me, I think it has really done what it is supposed to do. How many people in local communities can afford to see a TV, to buy radios? And yet we know there are small solutions that government in partnership with other agencies can really do. Take an example, offering dustbins in communities that are really badly off with waste management. I personally, I was in Mbale on Tuesday, around that River Nabiyonga and the cells that were really being affected. I went into deep communities where they live. The pollution, the plastic pollution, the velas, they are really, really too much in the environment. And of course, communities, they don't have knowledge on how to go about it. They are not aware. The sensitization the government is doing is benefiting those people who can manage to hear the TV, who can manage to see the TV, the radios, but community that are really being affected by these pollutions are not really being considered. So as I wind up, I think government, we are being governed by poor governance. And again, we are really moving with the capitalism economy, which is really bringing the challenge to us as Ugandans. And I don't think if we don't change the economy that we are living in, we are not going really to develop. However much we are extracting these fossil fuels in the name of developing or in the name of becoming the middle income country, if we don't take care of the management of resources, if we really don't give out how we are going to really create transparency of how these resources are going to be used or are going to benefit the communities or the Ugandans, we are missing it out. And maybe as I wind up, I request on the government and maybe the civil society organizations, and maybe starting from local levels, national levels, and maybe international levels, the environmentalists all, let us really create public awareness starting from our families. As a parent, tell your daughter, tell your son that dumping down Kavela, it is going to affect you, it is going to affect your child. And give them where maybe you're taking water when you're coming from work, keep that bottle of water, take it to your home. And maybe before I forget, we need to know how to properly separate these wastes. We are crying of poor, Ugandans we have the challenge of energy poverty, but these wastes that we use at home, talk of matoke, the leftovers of food, and other waste that can load, trust me, we can really recycle those materials and create the biomass that can help the vulnerable communities that cannot really afford to buy electricity, that cannot really afford to buy the solar panels. We can use, if we sensitize communities on how to separate our solid waste, on how to separate our wet waste, on how really, dry waste, we separate them. They can do really great job in our communities, and communities can really benefit. How many communities know that when you find a plastic bottle, when you correct it and you take it to the companies to be recycled, can really, maybe you can get more income for your own? How many know that? They don't know. So I think as government, as Ugandans, we still have a lot of things to do, to work on, to make sure that our country is free from plastic pollution, to make sure that our communities really understand what is the importance of making the proper waste management. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene, for that. It's and I absolutely also agree with you when it comes to companies and government. There should be credits for recycling these bottles, or for proper disposal of these bottles everywhere in the world, and mainly in countries that care about the environment, or at least in countries that are trying to make progress. There are credits given to people who return plastics, who return bottles for proper disposal. And I think that could also be something. Uganda, for example, also has a very high unemployment rate. If we emphasize the credits or points or money for returned bottles, that could also be a source of additional income for many people who use bottles a lot, restaurants and things like that. Why should a bottle that is recyclable go to a landfill? For sure, that is the wastage of resources. In any case, it also contributes to the greenhouse emissions and things like that. And also, when you presenting and this is to lead us to Simon, I remember that we have had cities in Uganda, now cities, back then they were towns, which have been historically referred to as clean, model cities. And Mbale was, I think, for many years, the cleanest city in Uganda. I was in Mbale in 2021. That was the last time I was in Mbale. What I saw did not reflect what Mbale has always been. And this, begs the question, Simon, why is it becoming hard for cities or places like Mbale to handle this issue of the plastics? And what do you think should be done? Because Mbale was a clean place, but right now markets, places all over, rubbish is all over the place. The order that Mbale had is not there. Perhaps you could correct me. I mean, I've not been there since 2021. I might not know. You could tell us how this plastic issue is being handled in Mbale, and if there is progress to that extent. And you're also an environmentalist who is based in Mbale. You can also tell us what you are doing as civil society in Mbale to ensure proper disposal of plastics, but also generally to ensure environmental protection in Mbale city. We also remember last year Mbale faced immense flooding that killed people, which is also attributable to climate change. Over to you, Simon.
Yes, well, like you said that many years ago, actually sometime back, Mbale was regarded as one of the most cleanest cities, not only in Uganda, but East Africa, the East African region. But today, if you come to Mbale, the situation in Mbale is really so appalling. There is a lot that needs to be done. There is a lot of garbage everywhere. You move to various parts of Mbale city, you will get garbage, you will get plastics and other wastes. And I think by then, there are really proper policies that were being implemented, and people really tried, those in authority tried to ensure that they implement the authorities. They find you littering the environment, they always penalize you, they take you to municipal court, they find you like maybe cutting down any tree within the city, they find you disposing rubbish anyhow, they take you to that municipal court. But I think generally, even the municipal authorities have become laxed in ensuring that these policies that they used to implement continue to be implemented. There are very few gazetted areas nowadays in Mbale city for dumping these plastic wastes. Also, the issue of population, as a city, as now a city, the population is growing, and population city comes with population growth, and when the population grows, it also introduces on some other aspects. For instance, where they used to dump the rubbish, for instance, in Amatala, if you go there today, the population is too high, so there's literally less space for dumping rubbish. But we are trying, the Center for Constitutional Governance and the city authorities and other stakeholders within Mbale, to ensure that Mbale comes back to like how it was before. And we are doing this in ensuring that we conduct these sensitization meetings with various stakeholders and even community level, at community level. We conduct radio talk shows. We also go to hit the communities and tell the community, look, Mbale city was a model city in East Africa. But right now, as you look at Mbale, it has lost it. But we need to bring back that glory. And in so doing, there are campaigns that we are conducting, both on radio, community level, and I see there are some gazetted areas that are trying to plant trees. We also assist Center for Constitutional Governance. We have held some meetings with the city authorities so that they can provide dust bins in specific areas, like areas that are very busy, like the market areas, the streets, to ensure that at least this waste is manageable. We also, and then also the category of people who bring a lot of plastics within the city are these street kids. They go picking plastics from the rubbish pits, for example, in Mandamatala, and then they bring the one to sell. At times they don't find a market, and there are children who stay in town. So when they fail to get a market, you find that because they failed to get a market, they come and dispose of those, spread those plastics within within the city. So we're also having an engagement with them to ensure that at least plastics dumping should plastic dumping should be reduced. Also, there's also an issue of ignorance. The most you see when it comes to the most important thing is creating awareness. There are people within Mbale who don't know the dangers of these plastics. So it is a collective responsibility within us who are at least stakeholders who are knowledgeable about these things, and then also the city authorities and other people to come on board and sensitize the masses on the dangers of these plastics, and also the best ways on how to handle these plastics. There is also an issue, I don't know, it's just, I think, a growing mentality within us, Ugandans or the global humans, that we have adopted a policy of to whom it may concern. We are not taking personal responsibility in ensuring that we safeguard our environment. Somebody goes to the shop, buys a water, a packed water bottle, and then after taking, just dumps it there. So and those are the things in Mbale that we are trying to fight. Those in authority, we are in touch with the division, municipal court authorities, to ensure that any form of illegal dumping, somebody is penalized. And I see at least they have started nowadays, at least within the city center. When you follow, actually, that there's a street called the Republic, Namboa, even some parts of Palsa Road, Navionga, Bishop Wasike, you find that those streets are clean. Now the hurdle is now the outside areas like Namatala, Moni, Musoto, some parts of Nkoma, Namakwekwe, where there are slums. But we're also trying to ensure that we reach out to those areas. Sensitization is a continuous thing. You don't sensitize somebody, you don't expect to sensitize somebody today and then I expect a change immediately. So these sensitizations are continuing, and I am positive that with the time, Mbale City will be a greater one. That's my submission.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us that context and what indeed you're doing. We really appreciate, and we believe those efforts will make a difference. Sandra, as a policy analyst, you are and every day involved in looking perhaps for solutions on how to beat plastics, on how to embetter the environment. And when Irene was presenting, she talked about proper, and you also brought it up earlier, proper disposal of rubbish, such as sorting of rubbish in our homes, at industrial scale, name it, so that it is properly, that all these types of rubbish are properly taken where they're supposed to be. She also mentioned that many times there is mixing of biodegradables with plastics, with glass. How do you think in a country like ours we can reach that level of proper disposal? What should be done to properly dispose rubbish, following some of those criteria, sorting in homes, to sort, to show that these will rot, these ones will not rot, these ones are perhaps they will explode if they are put together. what are the models that you think we can use, and how can we achieve that? Consequently, you can also, talk about the impact, as second, the impact of pollution and plastics on the oceans. I think it's something that we shouldn't leave out. And that will also apply to you, Frank, as we near the end of this conversation. You also talk about how plastics are impacting the aquatic life and also the wildlife. Yeah, over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Martin. First of all, I think for us to work towards, for us to achieve proper disposal of plastic, it needs to start with us. It starts with us. Earlier, Irene was talking about, you asked Irene, I think, I don't know if you could please rephrase the question you asked Irene.
Earlier in the conversation, I asked her maybe the tension that I have among the many questions.
Okay, to make my point, I think disposal should genuinely start with us. Like, I'm going to give an example. You're on the road and someone is done with a bottle of, let's say, Sprite or Rizeri, and they just open their window and throw it out. I think that's a very, very bad practice. And people around me, my friends, my family have gotten so used to me scolding them to not dump things around. They even call it omwaga at this point because it's genuinely a bad thing. I think we need to encourage. It should start with you and the people around you. I mean, if you open your Renzori bottle, take your water, probably put the seal inside the bottle, then dispose of your bottle in a cleaner, in a better way. And the other problem I think we have is we do not take things seriously. I think as Ugandans, we really do not care. So in 2009, there was a plastic ban policy and a Finance Act, which banned the importation and manufacture of plastics, so plastic bags. But nothing happened. I mean, we're in 2023 and you'll still walk into a shop and the things you get will be given to you in a black kavera. But in that period, in the time range between, I think, 2019 and probably 2019, a decade later, this law was should I say, upgraded by NEMA as a NEMA Act. And instead, they kind of turned it down. Instead of totally banning the importation and manufacture of plastic bags, they reduced it to 30 microns. So that may be like a very, I don't know. But still, it doesn't make sense because we're still using kavera in the same way. So I think that what we should do is probably encourage our manufacturers, the people, the industries we have around to find better ways of packaging, to like maybe come up with more sustainable and eco-friendly packaging policies. Like we should really make noise. I don't know if I should put it that way, against kavera, and maybe adapt for paper, because paper decomposes. Because you told me to link it to how it affects aquatic life. 90%, I read somewhere that 90% of fish and birds have plastic in their stomachs because these are, let's say, marabou stocks. They eat trash. They eat what they find. So at the end of the day, we find we're affecting our ecosystem in ways we do not understand. And the fact that the ecosystem works in different, it's a chain thing. If, let's say, we deplete the bird population, that's going to affect us in ways we do not even know. But it's a system. That's why it's called an ecosystem. So the other way plastic affects aquatic life is you will dump your kavera, you'll dump your bottle in the swamp, and you will not mind. But this, at the end of the day, the number is going to increase, and it will block the oxygen intake of the fish. The fish population will reduce. A fisherman will go on the river, on the lake, to try to make a fish catch for the market or for his family back at home, and the numbers are reduced. So that it's a system. What you do, the smallest action you make affects everyone on a bigger scale. So I think what we need to do is, before we run to attack the government, because I really believe policymakers have done their part. We have the policies are set. it's the implementation that lacks. Maybe what they don't do is push maybe the funding and the sensitization to like let people know what these policies are about and their pros and cons and how they should be achieved. But the policies are in place. What is lacking is the implementation, and Irene shed light on this earlier. So I think what we need to do once again is start on a small scale. Start with yourself, start with your family, your friends, your community, and spread. I mean, environment Day is on Monday. So it is a time for us to, go out there, maybe sensitize people about things they have no idea about. So that at the end of the day, we have there's action towards what we desire.
Yeah, thank you. The Irene question was on tensions. Why is there hostility, from the people when it comes to this environment talk? I don't know if that is the question you wanted to refer to.
Yes, but
also
I got
answered
it. But he was dragging it to carelessness as people and the country. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And leading to Frank, all the time I have traveled on Lake Victoria, I've been dismayed by the amount of rubbish, the amount of trash or plastics floating on that lake. It's you would wonder whether it's you're traveling on a lake or on the streets of Kampala, because the plastic is just it's immense. I don't even know the extremes. I can even the extreme words I can use to describe how this issue is. And indeed, I did a simple search using ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT about this situation in pollution, plastic pollution around the world. And this is what I got. It is estimated that between 8 and 12 million metric tons of plastic enter the oceans every year. And this, of course, affects marine life. Now, there is also some tiny microplastics. And it's estimated that about 5.2 metric tons of plastic particles, those small ones, are floating on oceans and lakes, 5.2 metric tons. That's crazy. Going now to also the wildlife, about 800 species are affected by plastic debris. And of course, this affects their survival. And many of these are even animals that under the danger that have been flagged off that under imminent danger of extinction. Help us draw the nexus between plastic pollution, the ecosystem in regard to marine life and aquatic life and wildlife. You understand Uganda is quite gifted when it comes to natural waters. Uganda has fresh water. But again, we also have a lot of efforts to make that water dirty by pollution and things like that. But also Uganda is rich at wildlife. So make us understand how terrible waste disposal plastics can impact the aquatic life and also the wildlife. And in essence also contribute to dire consequences for our economy and the environment. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you very much, host. First of all, I need to note that, very much the two previous speakers have had a very good conversation on the effects of plastic or even overall waste on our ecosystem, whether you're looking at animals or whether you're looking at aquatic life like fish and all this. And it's very easy for us to not really give this the kind of importance it deserves. But the reality is that there is a very increasing risk and danger that we're not only having animals, but also on that particular. For example, let's just look at plastic pollution with the cows that we are breeding every day, and for now, for the villages, cows are literally on a free range. They walk, move wherever they want and look for food. And just by the fact that there's a risk that these cows can swallow this plastic waste, and some is leading to death, to diseases that are, you don't understand. And at the end of the day, we're actually losing the cattle to this kind of waste. When you look at fishing, you talk about Lake Victoria. Honestly, it's becoming very appalling. You go there and you're going to find plastic waste all over the place, and people do not actually realize that the very fish that we are trying to get so that we can feed our families and for the commercial purposes are eating this plastic waste. And at the end of the day, they're reducing in numbers, they're dying off the lakes. And what that does to us, the people, is that one, first of all, we're going to decrease the number of fish that we have in the lakes. And what does that mean? It means that one, there are people that are around the highlands, there are people that are around these places, and even as a country, there are people that survive on the fishing. One, on a small scale, the people that survive on the fishing to eat, like that's their food, because they cannot afford any other thing. I have seen that happens in islands. I've seen that happen to the population surrounding these lakes. That's literally what they wake up every day. That's what they're eating. Either today it's mokene, and then the next day they're going to maybe change it to tilapia. They just rotate around fish. That's their daily meal. But also in terms of, so we're risking the lives of those people in terms of famine and their inability to actually take care of themselves and eat. Then secondly, if you look at it from the commercial perspective, if we are going to export fish in other countries and ensure that as a country we are earning money, we also need to make sure that we're protecting them. So commercially, we're using money. If we don't have fish in the lakes, what are we going to export? But also, even beyond the people that are surrounding these lakes, even us who live in whether Kampala or Soroti or Bale, I am rest assured that it doesn't take 2 weeks without an average Ugandan eating fish at least once a week, or for some people even twice a week. For me, at office, we have a service provider, and every time, on the menu, at least the week doesn't end, you've eaten fish twice. So at the end of the day, you get to realize that even for people, and even from the perspective of human health, it's a food, the food vitamin that you get from eating fish alone has an impact on your health. That's why you have to eat so that you're healthy and all these kind of things. So the danger is very high. The danger in terms of us losing out on the fish quality, but also on the quantity, it increases every day because of the laxity that we have with the West and all that. But overall, the effects of waste, pollution, and lack of attention to the environment on our economy as a country. When we are touting every time that we're attracting investors to come to Uganda, to put all these big industries taking place, and we don't give environmental consideration to these people, in long term, it's affecting our people. It's affecting us. So we have a policy that government is looking for investors. These investors are going to come in the country. Ideally, what the law requires is that when an investor comes and they're putting out an industry, so you're supposed to carry out an impact assessment. But what happens with most of these impact assessments? People are paid off. And you find that the likes of NEMA and all these other government institutions are giving out reports that the impact assessment was carried out and we have done the assessment, the effect of this industry, of this particular project on aquatic life, on animals, on the people, on the environment, and everything is okay. And the next thing you see, there's an industry somewhere, and there's very, very high pollution taking place, and there's nothing we're doing about it. So the first risk we have is that we're affecting the health of our very own population within those areas. Because every time you're waking up to a polluted air, there's an effect on that. The smokes and the relation it will have with other diseases like cancer and all that, it has an effect. The number two, if we are completely degraded, for example, soil and leading to soil erosion, we're not going to have people farming anymore. As many of us are aware, Uganda agriculture is the backbone of most countries in Africa, Uganda inclusive. So meaning that people still need the soil. People still need the soil to be fertile. What are we seeing here? One, we're seeing that all this plastic waste and other waste getting into the soil. And people, in a shortest time possible, these soils are not producing, crops anymore. They're not yielding because they're being affected by polythene bag, by plastic waste, and by some of the industrial waste that we have. We actually have very poor disposal of some of this industrial waste because nobody even cares. What happens when this industry produce all these dangerous chemical byproducts? Who is enforcing them? Who is ensuring that they are being disposed of in a recommended manner? So at the end of the day, we're having very high rate of soil erosion, and people are not having anything to feed on because the crops are not yielding, and that's very dangerous at the end of the day. Now, in the economic perspective, if you look at health of that and failing and the rest, in the economic perspective, people still need to grow these crops and come and sell. Many of us are aware.
And I want to follow, follow your discussion up with two questions. One, we've mentioned here that we have had laws in Uganda since time immemorial that have come to address the issue of plastics. For instance, 2009, 2019, the NEMA, I think the Act, the National Environment Act, and then we have recently in 2023 a directive. I think, I don't know whether it's an ordinance or whatever it was, from NEMA, trying to say they are going to begin enforcing the ban. I think it had, of course, it had some legal basis in the act, and there was noise all over the place. We are going to enforce this disposal of rubbish on the road. We've not seen it happen. Why is it like that? Why are our laws, our policies not working? And I'm asking this to you as a legal practitioner. But also, secondly, for environment activists, people who are concerned, like you and I, we have faced many obstacles in the court system. So there is one thing of enforcement. So that means, in any case, the courts are not even taking seriously these matters. And if it's not on the case of court, maybe the enforcement officers are not even taking these matters to court. We are not seeing people being prosecuted. We're not seeing people, being held accountable for violating the environment. And I know we even have a special court that handles some of these matters, but there is a challenge of reporting and prosecuting those matters. But even then, on the side of the activists who go to court, for example, under public interest litigation, it's been a bit hard for the environment to get friendly judgments. I've seen very many judgments that are thrown out. There's a particular judge who has a track record in that court that when you're an environment activist, you're going to be called all sorts of names. You're going to be called a wannabe. You're going to be called a seeker of attention. Do you also think that the judiciary, as an arm of government, is being complicit in this carelessness towards protecting of the environment? And also, of course, you can follow it up to the other question of why do we have these laws not working, not biting?
Well,
yeah, in a few minutes, like 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me start with the question of why our policies, or why are the laws not working or why we think they're not being enforced. Now, two things that we need to understand. For an enforcement of a law, there has to be a political will. And then two, there has to be knowledge about that law and how it can be enforced. Now you get to realize that, many speakers have noted, or even like you've noted yourself, that as a country, and I put this in my introductory remarks, that as a country, there's still very lack of urgency for environmental protection. We don't see it as important as it should be. And in turn, that has an effect on our enforcement mechanism. Because if you don't see something as important, it means you're not going to give it attention. So the challenges we're facing is that our leaders, whether parliament, whether at district level, whether at LC1 level, we still do not understand what exactly is it about the environment and why we need to protect it. And the moment there's a lack of will, whether from the executive, especially political will from the executive, the executive that includes the office of the president, and coming to cabinet ministers, who police, and all these enforcement agencies are under. So that challenge of political will still affects this, because police officers need to be trained. Police officers need to understand exactly what does the law say about this, because our laws actually give police officers power to arrest somebody who they even suspect that they might commit a crime. That's how good our laws are. Like, if they're just suspecting that you might commit a crime, they don't even allow the police officer to arrest you. But how many times do we actually see police officers watching people throwing plastic bottles? The question is, do they even know that that's a crime? Do they actually know that some of the actions that the public are doing are banned? So at the end of the day, there is a lot of ignorance on the enforcement agency. People do not know what are environmental crimes. Police officers have very little knowledge about environmental crimes. Many of you must have seen that there's an environmental police department. I've seen 2 or 3 vehicles move around, but there are not many. If you have 1 or 2 in Kampala, what happens to Mbale? What happens to Mbara? What happens to Soroti? So the reason why we feel like our laws are not being enforced is because of that ignorance, the political will to train these people, the political will to give these people the funding that they deserve, the political will to establish this kind of police department in as far as rural police outposts. It's not there, because police is not going to work without money. So the moment we have the political will, then the next thing you're going to say is that these people are going to be funded. The next thing you're going to say that they're going to train the police officers on environmental crimes. And at the end of the day, the numbers of police officers are going to increase. And then our policies are going to be enforced. The other challenge, again, in relation to political will, is that some of the environmental crimes are being committed by very high-profile people in government. You find that a minister or a very high-profile person has constructed within the areas of the wetland that by law they are not allowed to. But how are you going to send police officers to?
We have lost Frank. I hope Frank can, eventually rejoin, because he was still making some points, and specifically also to the point that he hadn't answered yet of courts. How can courts be part of this environment protection? How can courts safeguard the environment through their powers? Yet we have already seen that many a time courts have been a bit reluctant to enforce some of these laws, but also the activists who have gone to court have faced quite tremendous hurdles in court when they've gone to challenge some excesses of entities that violate the environment. I don't know if there's anyone who has something to say as we close. You could say it in 30 seconds, and then we can call it a show. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martin.
Yes.
For moderating. In regards to environment, I think it should be our collective responsibility to ensure that all of us have a role that we should play in safeguarding our environment. And in Mbale, we are trying to come up with, actually we have come up with a Clean Mbale campaign, where everybody comes on board to ensure that one, we clean up the litters, the rubbish that is within town. Secondly, we gazette areas that these wastes should be dumped. Third one also is to try to plant trees so that our environment is safeguarded. And lastly, we continue to sensitize people both on the radio and the communities. So we bring them on board and say, this is real our collective responsibility. You do not expect another person from a person from another country to come and, or another country or another town, come and safeguard our environment here. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you. Sandra, do you have anything to add?
Yes, it's basically a call for action against plastic pollution. I think now that we know how much of a pressing issue it is and how it affects ecosystems, how it affects marine life, how it affects cows, like other panelists spoke about, I think we need to actively go against it. We need to support companies that package their things a bit different. Let's say bakeries that maybe pack bread in paper bags. We need to do that more. So that maybe not to demarketize anything or anyone, but it's for the sake of our environment. We need to, advocate for things like bamboo straws, that we use less plastic straws. We need to actively engage in fighting against this. Maybe that's when we'll get actual political backup from the government and people in power to invest more energy and funds and investors against this plastic pollution battle. Yes, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Frank, you are still making your point. You make your last remarks, and you continue to answer to address what you are reacting to, and also make your closing remarks. Okay.
Oh,
yes.
I just remember. Okay, yeah, so I was just concluding that that's one of the biggest challenges with why our laws are not. To be quite honest, the judiciary would be willing actually to go ahead and enforce these laws. Sorry for the interruption. I don't know why suddenly the network started misbehaving. Yeah, the judiciary would be willing to help, first of all, one with the prosecution with passing a judgment to protect environment if it's ever brought to their attention. But some of these environmental crimes don't even end up reaching the judiciary. That's number one. But number two, the judiciary also needs training. It's very easy to make rulings and judgments within something that you have knowledge or expertise about. A lot of judges and magistrates do not really have environmental training. A lot of trainings in terms of what should they do to protect the environment, what should they do to promote environmental conservation and all that. And so there's need for that training so that they also understand. We have a few environmental courts within Kampala. You will see one, but what about the things that are happening in Bale, in Gulu, in all these other places? All these other ones have to go through the normal court, the same high court like every other person, and the same magistrate court like every other person. And to some extent, their understanding of the environment is also important, so that in case they are faced with these laws or they are faced with these cases, they're actually able to pass rulings and judgments that protect the environment. So I think there's also a need for training in that area. Then in conclusion, really, my recommendations would be that one, we need to encourage companies that are trying to protect the environment, companies that are manufacturing things like paper bags. Where need be, we should even give them tax waivers to encourage them. We have this, but if we're seeing this company that are actually but let's give them a chance to live for maybe 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frank. Unfortunately, now we have lost you. Unfortunately, you're not clear.
Number two, I think we need to, as a country.
Thank you very much, Frank. I think we have, yes. Thank you very much, Frank. Unfortunately, the network disrupted, and however, we had got a number of your points. You have emphasized that there should be some incentives for environment protection, and specifically to those entities that are taking steps to protect the environment. You have also advised that in the judiciary there is need for more training and more capacity building to see that the judges and court users are able to understand the environmental issues, which many times they have to interact with. And thank you. And indeed, there should be more action on activists, on policy makers, on advocacy groups, and on all of us citizens to ensure that we protect the environment, but also we beat plastic pollution. Thank you for that. I think we have reached indeed the end of this show, and I'll just make a few closing remarks, like I usually do. We as Africans have the environment as our biggest resource. We have the land, the waters, the air as our biggest resource. We cannot afford to lose them. We cannot afford to degrade them, because if we degrade them, we are endangering our own lives. We are not rich like Europe. We are not rich like Canada. We are not rich like Japan. We are not rich like the US. Those countries can afford mitigation of environment disasters and risks. We can't afford. And that is why, indeed, there is calls, and mainly it happened in the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, to have reparations by the rich countries for the damage they have done to the environment. We still call upon countries, the wealthy, to honor that and repair and give reparations to those communities that have been seriously affected by their actions, and the global south has been seriously affected. However, on our part, as Africans, we just cannot afford to degrade the environment. We may think we are following in their path by living recklessly, by destroying the environment, by wanting to drain the most out of it for development, but it's our future that we are jeopardizing. It's the future of those that will come after us. We are doing a disservice to ourselves. In any case, it's high time Africa becomes the model for the world in the protection of the environment. More than anyone else in the world, we as Africans benefit from the environment. We are closest to the land. We are closest to the water. We are closest to the ecosystems that make up the environment. And that is why we cannot afford to have any of those systems tampered with. It's high time that you and I stopped littering, stopped dumping rubbish anywhere, and it's important for us to properly dispose. It is dangerous for you to throw a polythene bag, a kavera, a plastic bottle, anywhere where it's not supposed to be put. It is dangerous, and the danger of it will be seen millions of years when you have left. Do you want the world to end with you if you do not protect the environment, if you do not protect our water? Before you undertake any action, ask yourself how the environment would react to this, or how much it would affect the environment. We need to be environment conscious, because we survive on the environment as Africans, and we cannot afford to lose it. I thank you, and I wish you a great week and happy World Environment Day. Thank you to our panelists and Center for Constitutional Governance. I sign out.